The champagne flute shattered against the hardwood floor, silencing the wedding band's cheerful melody. All eyes turned to the corner of the reception hall, where Caleb, 26, stood frozen, his heart pounding like a war drum. His ex-girlfriend, Vanessa, her red dress a stark contrast to the pastel decor, pointed a trembling finger at him, her voice venomous. "You think you can parade your choice here and ruin this day?" It was supposed to be a celebration, his sister Ellie's wedding. A day of love and family in the rolling hills of upstate New York. Caleb had come to support her, to smile through the ache of his own past, arm in arm with his partner, Marcus. But Vanessa's presence, uninvited and unannounced, was a storm cloud over the sunny September afternoon. She'd been his high school sweetheart, the one who'd left when he came out 3 years ago, spitting words of betrayal. Now, she was here, her eyes glinting with a mission to humiliate. Caleb's breath caught as Marcus, 29, stepped forward, his hand firm on Caleb's shoulder. "You don't get to do this," Marcus said, his voice low but steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The air crackled with tension, guests shifting uncomfortably, Ellie's new husband whispering to her across the room. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. One that would unravel secrets, test bonds, and redefine what family meant. Caleb had grown up in a small town nearby, where acceptance was hard-won. His parents, devout and traditional, had struggled when he came out. His father, Tom, a gruff mechanic, had barely spoken to him for a year. His mother, Linda, tried to bridge the gap with awkward hugs and Bible verses. But the distance lingered. Ellie, though, had been his rock. She'd cried with him, laughed with him, and insisted he bring Marcus to her wedding. "You're my brother," she'd said, "and I want you here. All of you." But Vanessa's appearance wasn't a coincidence. Caleb had heard whispers she'd moved back to town, bitter and vocal about his lifestyle. He hadn't expected her to crash Ellie's wedding, let alone confront him in front of 200 guests. Her words echoed, "You're an embarrassment, Caleb. You always were." Each syllable was a blade, slicing open old wounds. He felt the familiar shame creeping in, the voice that had haunted him since he was a teenager, whispering he'd never be enough. Marcus, sensing Caleb's spiral, squeezed his hand. "Look at me," he murmured, his dark eyes locking onto Caleb's. "You're not that scared kid anymore." Marcus was a firefighter, built like he could carry the world. But his strength was in his calm, in the way he grounded Caleb when the past threatened to pull him under. They'd met 2 years ago at a community fundraiser, Marcus's easy laugh cutting through Caleb's guarded walls. Now, as Vanessa's tirade continued, Marcus's presence was a lifeline. The crowd parted slightly, and Ellie appeared, her white dress glowing under the chandeliers. "Vanessa, you need to leave," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "This is my day, and you're not welcome." Vanessa laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Oh, Ellie, you're enabling him. You all are. He's living a lie, and you're celebrating it." Caleb's stomach churned. He wanted to disappear, to flee the prying eyes and the weight of Vanessa's judgment. But Marcus didn't budge. "You're wrong," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Caleb's not the one living a lie. You are clinging to hate instead of letting go. The words hung in the air, a challenge not just to Vanessa but to everyone who'd ever doubted Caleb's truth. The reception hall felt like a battlefield. The clink of glasses and distant laughter a surreal backdrop. Caleb's father, standing near the bar, looked away, his jaw tight. His mother hovered nearby, wringing her hands. The weight of their silence was heavier than Vanessa's words. Caleb wondered if they'd ever truly accept him, or if this moment would cement their distance forever. As Vanessa opened her mouth to retort, Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. You don't get to define him. Not today. Not ever. The crowd held its breath, sensing the shift. This wasn't just about Caleb and Vanessa, it was about love, courage, and the fight to be seen. And Marcus wasn't backing down. The tension in the room was a live wire, sparking with every glance and whisper. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. You think you're so righteous, Marcus. She spat, her voice dripping with disdain. But you're just his latest mistake. Caleb felt the words like a punch. But Marcus didn't flinch. He stood taller, his broad shoulders a shield against Vanessa's venom. The only mistake here, Marcus said, his tone measured but unyielding, is you thinking you have any say in who we are. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Caleb caught a glimpse of his cousin, Sarah, in the corner, her phone discreetly recording the scene. He cringed, knowing this moment might live forever online. Ellie stepped closer, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Vanessa, I'm serious. Get out, or I'll have security drag you out. Her voice cracked, but her resolve didn't. Caleb's heart swelled with gratitude for his sister, who'd always fought for him, even when their parents hesitated. But Vanessa wasn't done. You're all so blind, she said, turning to the crowd. He's confused, and you're letting him flaunt it at a sacred event. The word sacred stung Caleb. He'd spent years wrestling with his faith, his identity, and the town that raised him. Growing up, he'd hidden who he was, dating Vanessa to fit in, to please his parents, to silence the whispers. Coming out had cost him friends, his church, and nearly his family. Now, Vanessa was weaponizing that pain, twisting it into a spectacle. Marcus's hand tightened around Caleb's, grounding him. You're enough, Marcus whispered, so only Caleb could hear. Those words were a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge of doubt. Marcus had a way of seeing Caleb's truth, even when Caleb couldn't. Their relationship wasn't perfect arguments over late shifts. Caleb's insecurities, but it was real, built on trust and quiet moments, like cooking breakfast together or laughing at bad sci-fi movies. Ellie's husband, James, joined her, his face stern. You heard her. Leave. The crowd parted as two security guards approached, their presence a silent threat. Vanessa's smirk faltered, but she tossed her hair defiantly. Fine, she said. But this isn't over. Caleb, you can't hide forever. She stormed out, her heels clicking like gunfire on the hardwood. The room exhaled, but the weight lingered. Caleb's parents hadn't moved. His father's gaze was fixed on the floor, his mother's on her clasped hands. Caleb felt the old ache. Their love was there, but it was tangled in their fear of change, of what the town would say. He wondered if they'd ever see him as whole. Ellie hugged Caleb tightly, her veil brushing his cheek. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know she'd be here." Caleb managed a weak smile. "It's not your fault. You've done enough." But as the band resumed and guests returned to their drinks, Caleb felt exposed, like a wound laid bare. Marcus led him to a quiet corner, away from the crowd. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but searching. Caleb shook his head. "I thought I was past this. Past her. Past all of it." Marcus cupped his face gently. "You are. She's the one stuck in the past. Not you." They sat on a bench outside, the September air cool against Caleb's skin. The garden was strung with fairy lights, the laughter from the reception a distant hum. Marcus pulled Caleb close, and for a moment, the world was just them two men who'd found each other against the odds. But Caleb's mind raced. Vanessa's words had reopened scars, and his parents' silence was a fresh cut. He wondered if he'd ever escape the judgment, if love would always come with a fight. Inside, Ellie was working the crowd, deflecting questions with her usual grace. But Caleb knew she'd seen their parents in action too. He dreaded the moment he'd have to face them, to ask why they hadn't spoken up. The night was young, and the wedding wasn't over. Neither was the battle for acceptance. The reception hall buzzed with forced cheer, guests trying to reclaim the joy Vanessa had disrupted. Caleb sat outside with Marcus, the fairy lights casting soft shadows on their faces. He wanted to go back inside, to dance and laugh for Ellie, but his chest felt tight, like the air itself was pressing against him. Marcus rubbed circles on Caleb's back. "You don't have to go back in yet," he said. "We can stay here as long as you need." Caleb nodded, grateful but conflicted. He hated feeling like he was hiding, but the thought of facing his parents or worse, the curious stares of distant relatives, was overwhelming. "I just want her to be happy," Caleb said, meaning Ellie. "This is her day." "And she is," Marcus replied. "She's got James, her friends, and you." Vanessa didn't ruin that. Caleb wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at him. He'd spent so long trying to be the perfect son, the perfect brother, only to feel like he was letting everyone down by being himself. Inside, Ellie was pulling their parents aside, her face a mix of anger and determination. Caleb couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw his father's stiff posture, his mother's nervous glances. Ellie's hands moved animatedly, her voice rising just enough to catch fragments. "My brother deserve this." Caleb's stomach twisted. He loved Ellie for fighting for him, but he hated that she had to. Marcus noticed Caleb's gaze. "She's got your back. Always has," he said. "But you need to talk to them too. Your parents." Caleb's throat tightened. What if they don't listen? What if they never do? Marcus's eyes softened. "Then you've got me, and Ellie, and a whole life ahead. But you deserve to say your piece." Caleb thought back to the day he came out to his parents. 23. Sitting at their kitchen table. His father had walked out without a word. His mother had cried, saying she'd pray for him. They'd come around enough to keep him in their lives. But their acceptance was fragile, like a cracked vase holding water. Vanessa's scene had tested that fragility. and Caleb feared the vase was about to shatter. The music shifted to a slow ballad, and couples filled the dance floor. Caleb watched through the glass doors as Ellie danced with James, her smile radiant despite the earlier chaos. He envied her ease, her ability to push forward. Marcus stood, offering his hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's dance. Just us. Right here." Caleb hesitated, then took Marcus's hand. They swayed under the stars, the garden their private ballroom. Marcus hummed softly, his warmth steadying Caleb's frayed nerves. For a moment, it was enough: the music, the night, the man who loved him. But the moment broke when Caleb's father appeared at the door, his silhouette rigid against the warm light. "Caleb," Tom said, his voice gruff. "We need to talk." Caleb froze, his hand tightening in Marcus's. He'd waited years for his father to initiate a real conversation. But now, the prospect terrified him. Marcus gave him a small nod, a silent promise to stay close. Caleb took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They followed Tom to a quiet corner of the garden, where Linda waited, her eyes red-rimmed. The air was heavy with unspoken words. Caleb braced himself, unsure if this would be reconciliation or rejection. But as his father began to speak, Caleb realized this moment would change everything. Tom stood with his hands in his pockets, the same posture Caleb remembered from childhood lectures about scraped knees or broken curfews. Linda hovered beside him, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. The garden's fairy lights flickered, casting uneven shadows across their faces. Caleb felt Marcus's presence behind him, a quiet anchor in the storm brewing in his chest. "I don't know how to do this," Tom began, his voice rough, like gravel underfoot. "What happened in there, with Vanessa, it wasn't right." Caleb's heart skipped, hope and fear colliding. His father wasn't one for apologies, or even conversations. This was uncharted territory. "But," Tom continued, "I didn't know what to say. I still don't." Caleb's hope faltered. He dreamed of this moment, his father acknowledging him, seeing him, but the words felt hollow, like a half-step forward. Linda reached out, touching Caleb's arm. "We love you," she said, her voice trembling. "We've always loved you. But this is hard for us." "Hard for you?" Caleb's voice cracked, years of frustration spilling out. "Do you know how hard it's been for me? Hiding who I was, losing friends, feeling like I'm wrong just for existing." His eyes stung, but he refused to look away. Marcus stepped closer, his hand brushing Caleb's back, a silent reminder of his strength. Tom's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Linda's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't want to lose you," she said. "We thought maybe it was a phase, something we could pray away." Caleb flinched, the words a familiar sting. He'd heard them before, in quieter moments, when his mother thought love could fix him. "It's not a phase," Caleb said, his voice steady now. "It's who I am. And Marcus, he's not just someone I'm with. He's my home." Marcus's hand tightened on his shoulder, and Caleb felt a surge of courage. "I need you to see that. Not just tolerate it, see it." Tom looked at Marcus for the first time. Really looked at him. Marcus met his gaze, unflinching, Mr. Hayes, Marcus said, I know this isn't easy, but Caleb's fought for this family. For you. Even when it hurt him. He deserves the same fight from you. The silence stretched, heavy and raw. Inside, the reception continued. Laughter and music a distant echo. Caleb's heart pounded, waiting for his father's response. Tom's eyes dropped to the ground, then back to Caleb. I don't understand it, he admitted, but I don't want to lose my son. It wasn't everything Caleb wanted, but it was a crack in the wall, a sliver of light. Linda pulled Caleb into a hug, her tears soaking his shirt. We'll try, she whispered. We'll try harder. Caleb hugged her back, his own tears falling. He glanced at Marcus, who gave him a small, proud smile. But the moment was fragile. Caleb knew trying wasn't the same as accepting, and the road ahead would be long. As they returned to the reception, he saw Ellie watching from the dance floor, her eyes bright with hope. She rushed over, pulling Caleb and Marcus into a group hug. You're my family, she said fiercely. All of you. The night wore on, and Caleb danced with Marcus, their hands intertwined. For the first time, he felt like he belonged not just at the wedding, but in his own skin. But Vanessa's words lingered, and Caleb knew this wasn't the end. There were battles left to fight, and he'd need every ounce of strength to face them. The dance floor pulsed with life, couples swaying under the twinkling chandeliers. Caleb and Marcus moved together, their steps tentative at first, then bolder, as if claiming their place in the celebration. Ellie caught Caleb's eye from across the room, raising her glass with a grin. For a moment, Caleb let himself believe the worst was over. But the whispers followed. Aunts and uncles, old family friends, their glances darting toward Caleb and Marcus. Some smiled warmly, others turned away, their discomfort plain. Caleb's chest tightened. He'd faced judgment before, but here, surrounded by family, felt sharper, like a blade pressed against his heart. Marcus sensed it, pulling him closer. They don't matter, he murmured. We do. Caleb nodded, but his eyes drifted to his parents, sitting at a table with forced smiles. Their conversation in the garden had been a start, but it wasn't enough. He wanted more than promises to try. He wanted them to see him, to love him without reservation. Marcus followed his gaze. Give them time, he said. They're here, aren't they? The music slowed, and Ellie took the microphone, her voice cutting through the chatter. I want to thank everyone for being here, she said, her eyes locking onto Caleb's. Especially my brother, Caleb, and his partner, Marcus. They're my heart, and I'm so proud to have them here. The room erupted in applause, some hesitant, others enthusiastic. Caleb's throat tightened, overwhelmed by his sister's unwavering love. But not everyone clapped. A few guests, including a cousin Caleb barely knew, slipped out to the patio, their faces sour. Caleb's father stood abruptly, excusing himself to the bar. Linda followed, her expression unreadable. Caleb's heart sank. He'd hoped Ellie's words would bridge the gap, but the divide felt wider than ever. Marcus led Caleb to a quieter corner, away from the crowd's eyes. You can't control them, he said, his voice gentle but firm. But you can control how you move forward. Caleb leaned into him, drawing strength from his warmth. Marcus was right, but the weight of his family's half-acceptance was heavy. He thought of the years spent hiding, the nights questioning his worth. He didn't want to carry that burden anymore. As they returned to the dance floor, a new figure approached Sarah, Caleb's cousin, her phone still in hand. "I recorded it," she said quietly, her eyes nervous but kind. "Vanessa's outburst. I didn't post it, but people are talking. It's already spreading." Caleb's stomach dropped. The idea of his pain becoming gossip, or worse, a viral video, made him feel exposed all over again. "Don't worry," Sarah added quickly. "I'll delete it if you want. I just thought, maybe it could show people what you're up against." Caleb hesitated. Part of him wanted to erase the moment, to bury it. But another part, the part Marcus had helped him find, wanted to fight back not with anger, but with truth. "Let me think about it," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Sarah nodded, slipping away. Marcus squeezed his hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Caleb looked at him, the man who'd chosen him despite the storms, and felt a flicker of hope. The night was far from over, and the choices ahead would shape their future. The reception wound down, guests drifting to their cars under a starlit sky. Caleb and Marcus stayed until the end, helping Ellie stack chairs and gather stray napkins. The mundane tasks grounded Caleb, a reminder that life went on. Even after a night like this, Ellie hugged them both, her eyes tired but warm. "You made my day perfect," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Back at their hotel room, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, the city lights blurring through his unshed tears. Marcus joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Talk to me," he said. Caleb sighed, the weight of the day spilling out. "I thought I was stronger than this. But Vanessa, my parents, it's like I'm 16 again, scared and hiding." Marcus listened, his silence a safe space. "You're not that kid," he said finally. "You stood up to her. You faced your parents. That's strength." Caleb leaned into him, the words sinking in. Marcus had a way of making him feel seen, not just loved but understood. It was why Caleb had fallen for him, those quiet moments when Marcus's steadiness felt like home. The next morning, Caleb woke to a flood of notifications. Sarah hadn't posted the video, but someone else had a shaky clip of Vanessa's outburst, captioned with hashtags about love and hate. It had thousands of views, comments ranging from support to vitriol. Caleb's heart raced. He'd wanted to control his story, but it was out there now, raw and public. Marcus scanned the comments, his jaw tight. "Some of these people get it," he said, pointing to messages of solidarity. "But the hate is loud." Caleb nodded, his mind racing. He could ignore it, let the video fade into the noise of the internet. Or he could respond, turn the pain into something meaningful. The idea terrified him, but it also sparked something Newa desire to reclaim his narrative. He called Ellie, who was still glowing from her wedding night. "I saw the video," she said, her voice fierce. "You don't have to do anything. But if you want to fight back, I'm with you. Caleb smiled, grateful for her fire. He thought of his parents, their tentative steps toward acceptance. He wanted them to see him not as a problem, but as a person with a story worth telling. Caleb and Marcus spent the day drafting a response, not a video, but a written post, raw and honest. Caleb poured out his journey, the fear of coming out, the loss of friends, the slow rebuilding of his life with Marcus. He wrote about Vanessa's words, how they'd hurt but also strengthened his resolve. Love isn't a choice, he wrote, but courage is. I choose to live my truth, and I hope you'll see it as strength, not shame. They posted it on Caleb's social media, tagging Ellie's wedding hashtag to tie it to the moment. The response was immediate: likes, shares, messages from strangers who'd faced similar battles. Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. I read your post. I'm proud of you. It was small, but it was a start. As the day ended, Caleb felt lighter, like he'd shed a layer of fear. The fight wasn't over, but he wasn't alone. Marcus kissed his forehead, a silent promise of tomorrow. Together, they were unstoppable. The post went viral, shared across platforms, picking up traction in local news. Caleb's words, raw and unfiltered, struck a chord. Messages poured in, some from old classmates who'd drifted away, others from strangers who saw themselves in his story. You gave me courage. One wrote, I came out to my family today. Caleb read each one, his heart swelling and breaking all at once. Marcus watched him scroll, a quiet smile on his face. You did that, he said, nudging Caleb's shoulder. You turned her hate into something beautiful. Caleb shook his head, still processing. I just wanted to be heard. But as the messages kept coming, he realized it was more than that. He'd given others a voice too. Ellie called, her voice bubbling with excitement. You're famous, she teased, then softened. Seriously, Caleb, I'm so proud. Mom and Dad, they're talking about it. They're reading the comments. Caleb's breath caught. He hadn't heard from his father since the wedding, and his mother's text had been a surprise. The idea that they were engaging, even quietly, felt like a miracle. But not everyone was supportive. Online trolls echoed Vanessa's venom, calling Caleb's post attention-seeking, unnatural. He tried to ignore them, but each comment was a pinprick, reminding him of the world's cruelty. Marcus noticed, pulling him away from the screen. You can't carry their hate, he said. It's not yours. Caleb nodded, but the words lingered, a shadow over his newfound courage. A week later, Caleb's parents invited them to dinner. The invitation was unexpected. A simple text from Linda, come over Sunday. We'd like to talk. Caleb stared at it, torn between hope and dread. Marcus squeezed his hand. We'll go together, he said. Whatever happens, we face it as a team. Sunday arrived, and Caleb's nerves were a live wire. The drive to his parents' house was quiet, the familiar streets of his childhood now tinged with tension. Marcus hummed softly, a habit that always calmed Caleb. When they pulled into the driveway, Linda was waiting at the door, her smile tentative but warm. Tom stood behind her, his expression unreadable. Dinner was simple roast chicken, mashed potatoes, The kind of meal Caleb had grown up with. The conversation started safe. Ellie's honeymoon. The weather. Marcus's job. But as the plates cleared, Tom cleared his throat. "I read your post," he said, his voice low. "I didn't get it. Not at first. But I'm trying to." Caleb's heart pounded. "What changed?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. Tom looked at Linda, then back at Caleb. "You. The way you stood up. The way you wrote about it. I saw my son. Not what I was taught to fear." Linda reached for Tom's hand, her eyes shining. "We're not perfect," she said. "But we want to be better. For you." It wasn't a full embrace, but it was a bridge. Caleb felt tears prick his eyes, and Marcus's hand found his under the table. The night ended with hugs. Awkward but genuine. As they drove home, Caleb felt a weight lift, replaced by a fragile hope. The world wasn't perfect, but his corner of it was starting to heal. Months passed, and Caleb's post became a touchstone for others. He and Marcus started a small online group, a space for people to share their stories of love and struggle. It wasn't activism, not exactly just a community, a place to be seen. Caleb found purpose in it, a way to turn his pain into connection. His parents kept their promise, slowly opening their hearts. Tom asked Marcus about his firefighting stories, his gruff exterior softening with each visit. Linda sent recipes, asking Caleb to teach her how he and Marcus made their famous lasagna. It was progress, imperfect but real. Ellie, ever the cheerleader, hosted family dinners, her laughter a glue that held them together. Vanessa faded from their lives, her outburst a footnote in Caleb's story. He heard she'd moved again, her anger isolating her. He didn't wish her ill, but he didn't look back either. She'd been a mirror to his past fears. But he wasn't that person anymore. He was Caleb's brother, partner, son, whole. One spring evening, Caleb and Marcus walked through their favorite park, the same one where they'd had their first date. The cherry blossoms were in bloom, petals drifting like soft promises. Marcus stopped, pulling Caleb close. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for the wedding or the post, but for every day you choose to be you." Caleb's eyes burned, but he smiled. "I couldn't do it without you," he said. Marcus shook his head. "You could. But I'm glad I get to be here." They kissed under the blossoms, the world fading to just them. It wasn't a perfect ending. There would always be challenges, whispers, moments of doubt. But it was theirs, built on courage and love. At Ellie's first anniversary party, Caleb stood to give a toast. The room was smaller this time, just close family and friends. His parents sat together, their smiles genuine. "To love," Caleb said, raising his glass, his eyes on Marcus. "To fighting for it, and to the people who fight with you." The room cheered, glasses clinking, hearts full. As the night ended, Caleb caught his father's eye. Tom gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they'd all taken. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was enough. Caleb took Marcus's hand, feeling the weight of their shared strength. They'd faced shame and silenced it, not with anger, but with truth. And in that truth, they'd found a family, a future, and a love that no one could take away.